Hello, my name is Marcello Pagano.
And I'm Fran Cook, and we'd like to welcome you to PH207X, Health in Numbers, Quantitative Methods and Clinical and Public Health Research. Now, we are members of the faculty of the Harvard School of Public Health. The overarching mission of the Harvard School of Public Health is to advance the public's health through learning, discovery, and communication. But it lists its first objective as to provide the highest level of education to public health scientists, practitioners, and leaders.
So if we look at the title of the course, we see that it says Health in Numbers. So what do we mean by health? Now we can go to the WHO, the World Health Organization, and see how they define health. And there it is. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And what we're going to do is we're going to use numbers to help us measure health. And central to all of this is statistics. And the three tenets of statistics are that we deal with variability, we deal with inference, and we use probability to help us in our inference. Now, if we look at what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, wrote about here it is, the 10 great public health achievements in the United States in the last century. Number one, vaccinations. Number two, motor vehicle safety, etc. And I dare say that in every single one of these, numbers played a central role. Numbers to measure, because of their precision, we can measure and monitor how these advances were made, how they progressed through time, how what we need to do to make sure that we continue progressing as time goes on. So for example, let's just look at the top one, vaccination. The CDC continues to tell us when the vaccines were introduced. And of course, the first one, smallpox from 1798, but as recently as 1998, we have the rotavirus vaccine. Now, what was the impact of some of these vaccines? And we look at the next table in their report, and we see it. So for example, at the beginning of the 20th century, we had an annual morbidity of about 48,164 people who annually would come down with smallpox. By the end of the century, 0. We did away with that, all due to vaccines. Diphtheria. We went down from 175,885 down to about 1. So there's a 100% reduction. All the others, you can see there on the table, great reductions. Not as much as 100%, but still, there were a couple in there for 100%. So all these numbers that I've been throwing at you help us tell our story in a precise and accurate way. We're going to be applying this to public health research, and we mention in the title also clinical. Now, if you go to this website I've given you there, clinicaltrials.gov, you will see a collection of, it's a database, and there's a collection of clinical trials going on, and they say they've got 132,441 trials with locations in 179 countries. Now, it's interesting that all of this, all 132,000, and there's many more, I'm sure, are trials that we use as a basis for deciding how to treat patients and how to set up public policy, health policy, etc. And it's interesting to just look back and see one of the earliest clinical trials to have happened. And this was the one by James Lind, who investigated the problem of scurvy. Now, scurvy was, it killed sailors and left, who would, be out in the ocean for months on end without any vitamin C. Now we know that it's vitamin C, but back in those days, they didn't know what caused the scurvy or how to treat it. And James Lind did this wonderful experiment. And what he did was, here it is, you can go to that website, go to their website, and of the Lind Library, and you will find this, and I've lifted this from there. And here it is. On the 20th of May, 1747, I took 12 patients in the scurvy on board the Salisbury at sea. And their cases were as similar as I could have them. So in other words, he took 12 people, all similarly ill with scurvy. And what he did was he broke them up into 6 groups, 6 couples. And each couplet got a different treatment. So each one of these got a different treatment. And he observed them. And after some time, what he came to the conclusion was that the consequences was that the most sudden and visible good effects were perceived from the use of the oranges and lemons. So there were 2, one of those pairs got oranges and lemons, and they were the only ones who got better. And in fact, he goes on to say here that the one got better, etc., but the other was the best recovered of any in his condition, and being now deemed pretty well, was appointed nurse to the rest of the sick. So here was a clinical trial where 6 different treatments were tried, and only one of them worked. And it was very impressive in terms of the results. Now, I should add that it took the Admiralty 75 years to implement this treatment, I guess because it was cheaper to just impress men than it was to get citrus. They would have to go to Sicily to get this, so it was much more expensive. But that was it. So that was one of the first clinical trials.
So let's talk a little bit about what we'd like to do in this class. But first, let me give you some history. Marcello and I have been teaching here at the Harvard School of Public Health for many, many years. I think it was W.C. Fields, the comedian, who talked about vaudeville acts and said you'd never want to follow an act that involved children or animals. Well, for many, many years, I taught introductory epidemiology in the same room that in the previous section, Marcello was teaching introductory biostatistics. So he was the equivalent of the act using children or animals that I didn't want to follow, because we epidemiologists are hidden wannabe statisticians. There's a very strong quantitative aspect to epidemiology. And Marcello and I, over the years, have said, why are we having separate courses in biostatistics and epidemiology? They both involve or share common methods, quantitative methods. Well, only last year did the schools start deciding to offer a course that integrated both introductory epidemiology and introductory biostatistics. And Marcello and I would like this course to be, in some sense, modeled after that, to try to give you the integrated experience of what you'd learn in a course in epidemiology and what you'd learn in a course in biostatistics. Now, we've been at this game for 20, 30 years or something, at least I have. I remember when Marcello first arrived. But in any case, teaching has changed. We are moving into an era where online distance education is becoming much more commonly available. And I think we're both intrigued with the possibility of being involved in a venture like this with you, to try to help you learn these techniques by using the technology that we are quite honestly just becoming familiar with. We want to make use of the technical computing communication technology that we have available to us now to develop this course. But we want to stress that this course is different from, say, the course that I was just involved in, where we taught similar content to people here at the School of Public Health. Different in some positive ways and in maybe some less positive ways. For example, we're not going to get to meet you. We're not going to be able to make eye contact with you, learn to know more about you. Yes, we're going to try to do the best we can electronically over the web by holding chat rooms and things like that. But make it clear, we cannot reproduce the same experience you would have if you were sitting in a classroom here at the Harvard School of Public Health. And you might consider that a shortcoming of this course. But there are some clear advantages to teaching a course like this.
Yes. Now, Fran's right, and that is a big shortcoming in that we won't get to meet you. But, you know, I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, what's the optimum class? And I'm thinking the optimal class probably was if you could hire a tutor to teach you individually the same way they used to in the Middle Ages. The rich could hire a tutor to teach their children philosophy, to teach them mathematics, and then another one to teach them languages, whatever. So it was very individualized. And to me, that's probably the best way to communicate. Then you can go at your own speed. You can go faster when it's boring, and you can go more slowly when it's a little bit more difficult, and so on. I think that now you have control of the speed button there. You can stop at any time. You can go faster if you want. You can go back and repeat. That, to me, approaches more the individual style of a tutor. And so I think that that is certainly more advantageous than sitting in a class with 100 other students and going at some speed that may not be optimal for you. So there is that. You can stop the lecture at any time, or the module at any time, and go off on the web and do searches to bolster what you've just learned, etc. So there are a lot of advantages to this way of doing things. And we shall see. This is the first time we're doing this. We shall see how this works. Now, let me give you a little bit of a warning about this course in general. It starts off when it's a little bit dry because we have to set the foundations. So the foundations, stick with it, because once you get past that, it's a terrific course, and it's of consequence. What you're going to be learning will be very useful if you want to keep on doing research or practicing in this field. Now, a couple of logistics about the course. We're not going to be using a book. There's no book for the course. What you'll be getting, though, every week are these videos on what we have to say, and exercises that you can hand in and get graded. And then also, to help you in that, you will be finding a file, one or two files called jottings. And these jottings, we'll just sort of jot down little messages we want you to have, including the slides that we use in the presentation. Now, today, the only reason we can do as much as we're going to be doing in this course is if we have a decent statistical package to use. It's what we've chosen is the package Stata. Now, the course, of course, is free. The package Stata will be made available to you for free. The license will only last the length of the course, of course, but during that period, you will be able to use the package freely. Stata, we chose Stata partly because I use it all the time. We both use it. Partly because, but more importantly, it's one of the best available packages out there. It's very friendly. It provides phenomenal user support, and it's got tremendous coverage, and it's dependable, it's accurate, etc., etc. So that's what we'll be using in the course. Now, we'll also be using a data set, but Fran will tell you about that.
Okay. Before I mention the data that we'll be using, we have 4 very gifted colleagues, recent graduates from our doctoral programs, 2 from epidemiology, 2 from biostatistics. Their main job is to teach you Stata. We'll have weekly videos, demonstrations, you'll have homework assignments where you have to analyze data using Stata. So one of the practical byproducts of this course is becoming familiar using a standard software package to do the types of analyses that we epidemiologists and biostatisticians do. Now, what sort of data are we going to be using? The main data set for this class is a teaching data set based on the Framingham Heart Study, one of the classical epidemiologic studies. I'll talk about the Framingham Heart Study in the very first week of this course. But we're using a data set made available from our government, a teaching data set that's slightly different from what the real Framingham data is, so you can't make publications out of it. But it will capture the associations you would find in the actual data. So it's a very good vehicle for getting familiar with the types of analyses we will be doing together. In addition to that, we want to engage you in this class. So what we'd also like to do is to collect some data on you, some non-sensitive data to collect from you, make it into an analysis data set, analyze it in Stata, giving you opportunity to analyze it in Stata. So we'll give you some experience in collecting data, addressing certain hypotheses and analyzing those. So those will be the 2 main data sets that we're going to be using. In addition to that, to engage you in this class, we're going to try to repeat a very positive exercise we do in the classes we teach here on site. What we do on site is we break our students into small groups, send them off to a room with a faculty member or a graduate student to discuss a paper, critique that paper, talk about its strengths, talk about its weaknesses. We're going to try to repeat that experiment here with you. What we're going to do, what I've lined up, are some very senior epidemiologists who will come here and present a video where they present some background for a paper that they want you to read. And then we're going to ask you to read that paper, and answer a series of questions that the instructor has developed in conjunction with that paper. That's where the chat rooms come into play. That where each of you will be able to give each other your opinions on these papers. We'll try to jump in to the extent that we can. But at the end of, say, a few days, let's say the end of the week, we'll have another video where that same guest instructor comes back, gives you his or her interpretations of those questions, what they thought the appropriate answers would be, and also comment on some of the things that you'll be writing on. So we're hoping that will be a way to make you engaged in this class. And then finally, what we'd love to do if you were here in Boston, and we really even can't do this to our on-site students, we'd like to show you how a couple of classical studies are actually undertaken, how you run a study. So we're going to make a couple of videos where we bring in senior investigators running very large studies here at Harvard, And they will talk about the background of their study, talk about how it's run. We'll take some videos of how that studies are actually implemented in practice. And so hopefully you'll get experience of what it means to run a research project. So this is the very beginning of a journey. This course is running for 12 weeks, I believe. And the idea, as Marcello mentioned, is we have to lay some foundation early. The message I'd like to give to you right now is to stick with this course. Once the foundation is laid, we're going to be doing some very interesting things in terms of study design, analysis, critiquing literature, using Stata. I think it would be a very positive experience for you, so I hope you join us in this venture.